Hey everyone, I'm Papaw J with Papaw J's Woodshop. Hey, today we're gonna make a stand for. I made this cutting board a few weeks back, and it needs to have a stand for display. So we're gonna make a stand for display out of this chunk of walnut. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get one flat side, and then we're gonna get one square edge. Then we're going to cut this down to 6 inches on the table saw. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get on the joiner here. And now that we've got one flat side and one square edge, we're going to cut it down to 6 inches wide. We're to 6 inches wide like we need. Now we're going to resaw it to 3/4 of an inch thickness. We have two choices when we're resawing. We can either resaw on our bandsaw, which I have a bandsaw over there. Unfortunately, it's a 14-inch bandsaw, so therefore the throat thickness is only like 4 3/4, I believe, maybe 5 inches. It's not 6 inches. I can know that. So therefore, we're going to have to use the table saw to resaw. The downfall with the table saw is the kerf thickness of the blade is a little bit bigger than the kerf thickness of the bandsaw blade, but that'd be all right. Now, if you paid attention while I was cutting that, you saw that I took little bites at it at a time. Took I think four times of going through on each side. You do that so that way it doesn't bind down or bog down your table saw. This is only probably a 1 horse. I think it's a 1 horsepower table saw, so you got to take little bites at it. If you got something more powerful, you probably don't have to. But now that we've got our board resawn down to 3/4 of an inch thick, we're going to come over to the planer here, and we're going to thickness it down to 5/8 of an inch thick. And the way we're going to accomplish that is we're going to use two setup blocks: a 1/2 inch setup block and an 1/8 inch setup block will give us 5/8 of an inch thick. With our board now down to 5/8 of an inch thick, we're about 20 inches long. I need two boards that are 10 inches long, so we're going to go ahead and cut it in half here on the table saw with the miter gauge. And then after that, we will set up for our different angles. I'll explain those after. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to take this from being a square edge. We want to take this edge right here and rotate it back to 65 degrees. In order to do that, we have to make a cut along the bottom here, and we have to make an opposing angle cut. So you take 65, subtract it from 90, which gives us 25, and we'll cut a 25-degree angle cut along the bottom here, and that will tilt it back. Now that we've got both angles cut on the bottom, our pieces sit at a 65-degree angle as they should. Now we have to cut this back side right here. We have to cut that at a 45-degree angle, and we have to cut it at an angle as well. So we get a 45 plus another angle, a little compound angle action going here. And what it's going to do is it's going to cut a square edge based on this line here. It will be a square edge straight up, and we'll have a 45-degree angle on it. So then that way, let me show you my test pieces. These are my test pieces. And as you can see, I have my 25-degree angle, my 65-degree angle, and then on this side, I've cut a 45, and it sits at a 90-degree angle from the base. So that way, when you put the two pieces together, they go together just like this and line up. And then all we have to do is make a final cut on top. So that's what we're going to do next. Now, cutting these angles gets a little tricky. The first one's pretty easy. So we're going to cut on this angle right here. And the way you do this, measure here, which this is 6 5/8 inches. My thickness of my board is 5/8 of an inch thick, so I got to account for that 5/8, because if you look at a square 5/8 by 5/8, when you cut across at a 45, you end up going over 5/8 and going up 5/8. So we got to subtract 5/8 of an inch. What that does is it makes it instead 6 inches, and that will put the very edge of this blade on the very corner, on the outside corner right here. So that's the first cut. The second cut gets a little bit more difficult. Okay, now that we've cut the 45 on this one, we went off of this edge here to cut a perpendicular line. To do the opposite of this, so that way they match up and work right, we have to take this piece, and instead of cutting along this edge, we have to cut along this edge. So we have to put it in this way right here. And we have to cut, instead of a perpendicular line, which will just cut a 45 on this edge right here straight, we need to cut this at a 25-degree angle, and that will give us the angle that we need. In order to do that, we have this contraption, which is a false extended fence onto my miter gauge, and it's set at 25 degrees right now. Okay, one more final cut on the table saw. So we have sitting on the table, perpendicular up, our 45 on the back. But if you look, this is sitting at an angle. We want that straight across. So now we're going to reference this angle here, this side, and we're going to cut a perpendicular line across 90 degrees. That's going to be our next cut. Okay, now that we're sitting pretty good where we want to be. We got one more thing we've got to do that we got to finish up. One more angle, and we're not going to cut this one on the table saw. We're going to cut this one on the router table. We're going to use our chamfer bit. So what we've got to do is we got to take this corner from this corner here and come up at a 45-degree angle this way. And we're going to go the full thickness of the board. Okay, now what we got to do, we got to put some double stick tape down. I use carpet tape. It works really well. What we're doing, we're cutting more of an angle here on this board, and our bearing will not have nothing to ride on against right here. So we're going to add an extra board so that way our bearing has something to ride on. Because again, I didn't want to cut this on the table saw. It's getting kind of small, kind of hard to work with. I'd rather come over here to the router table. What you just saw me do was flatten one edge and square up an edge again on our remaining chunk of wood that we have. What we're going to do is we're going to cut us an 1 5/8 wide piece. Our cutting board is 1.5 inches thick, so we're going to be just a little bit 1/8 inch bigger. And what we're going to do is we're going to be putting the pieces on the bottom to hold the cutting board at the base. And we're going to use a technique called additive joinery to do so. We're going to be gluing long grain to long grain and long grain to long grain. So I'm not worried about the glue joints on these small pieces. They will be small pieces. Okay, now our next stop is going to be at the bandsaw. What we're going to do is we're going to cut this down. We're going to cut this piece of wood It's 1.5 inches thick. We're going to cut it. It's 1.125 inches this way, and we're going to cut it down to 5/8 of an inch. And then we'll go to the planer and we'll plane it down to 1/2 inch thick, because that's the thickness we need. And I'll explain that when we get to that point. After that, we'll make a few other cuts and we'll have our pieces we need. Planer now, we're going to take this through the planer. We're going to get our thickness to 1/2 inch. Right now we're at 5/8 of an inch. We're going to get it down to 1/2 inch. The next thing we need to do is we're going to square up an edge on the edge of this. We're going to square this up, and then we're going to use our spacer here to give us a 1 inch. We need 2 1-inch blocks. Like we've got everything cut and everything made. Now we just got to do some sanding, and we'll do some assembly and wait for everything to dry. Okay, now that we've let this dry for a couple hours, we're going to, we got a little bit of a gap. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a little bit of a gap right there. We're going to do a little, get the screwdriver out, and do a little brandishing, I believe is what it's called. And put a little glue in there and then kind of force the fibers over. Other than that, we'll get the hand sander out, or the hand sand pad out, and do some sanding. Right, screwdriver. Use this. Okay, so if you guys hear that, my grandchildren are in the shop with me today. They wanted to spend time in the shop with Papa, so let them in the shop. What's up, bud? Okay, so you put a little glue in the seam there, and then take something round and hard, you know, like a screwdriver or like this, a nut driver, and you run it up and down on each side of the joint. And what it does is it bends over the fibers and makes them touch each other. And because you put glue on it, it will glue it in place. And now we end up with that. Okay. Now we just have to glue our stuff together and we'll be good to go. Let me get some tape. I need a little tape here. We've got our case with our spring clips. We'll use spring clips probably to hold the 45-degree together. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some glue in the middle, and then we're going to throw some super glue on each edge, and then we're going to press it in place. We'll do that first. We'll probably let that dry for a little bit before we do anything else. Now once that glue, the wood glue dries, this will be permanently attached. Okay, so they're somewhat on there. Somewhat. Now they're on there. Our next step will be to put these pieces on, which is going to hold the cutting board. Now, once everything gets dry and everything, we'll go through and we'll round edges over, give it one final sanding, that type of thing. Need a little tape. Fold that over. We'll need 2 pieces of tape that's going to hold this on. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue right here. Put that piece on. Put our tape over it. Make sure that we're lined up. And our tape will hold it in place. We'll do the same with this one. A little bit of glue. Put our piece on. Do a little bit of squeeze out. Okay, we'll go ahead and throw some glue in this. This joint needs plenty of glue in it. Throw a little glue on this side. When you glue 2 miters together, that's a fairly strong joint. Let's get our clips. Got a little squeeze out, that's all right. That's always a good thing. A little squeeze out here. I'll show you guys a little trick. Get you a straw. Hold it. In here, you see all that glue in there? Get you a straw and run your straw right up it. And it will get rid of that glue. It will clean that glue up for you. You just got to get the glue out of your straw. And see, no glue in the seam. So now we're going to let this dry. We'll let that dry for about an hour or so, 2 hours, and go from there. Okay, now that we got it sanded and all the edges broke down, we're going to go ahead and put some finish on it. Today we're going to use some LiQWYD Danish oil. Real quick, simple finish. Dries fairly quick. We'll wipe it off with a rag. And then after that, we'll get some beauty shots and we'll be done with this project, get it packaged up.